Catherine Connors, myself, Chantal Genova, and our guest today is Mary Jo Land. Hi, everybody.
I totally didn't get a notification that we were live.
You didn't?
Snuck up on me. No.
Oh.
Hello.
That's part of being live. You never know when you're going to be live. So welcome, everyone. Before I give Mary Jo her formal introduction, I just want to say that we're here. We're ready for your comments. We're ready for your questions. We already have some lined up all about the honeymoon period. We'll dig into that and what that means, and I'm ready for a very interesting discussion. So as usual, when you do put your comments or your questions, you want to be mindful that we are on our public Facebook page. So you don't want to put any identifying or, well, any information that you want available to the public. So just be mindful of that. I'm a bit rusty because we haven't done this in a couple of weeks. Am I missing anything, Catherine?
No, I don't think so. Oh, there's a bit of feedback on my end. Just to be mindful that obviously all of us are in the same boat, that our children are home. So we are fully aware of on your end, if you need to log on and off, that's fine. This will be posted that you can rewatch, but just being mindful again, possibly on my end, maybe Chantel's, that you might hear some background noise. And if there's any tech issues that some of us have been experiencing, just make sure you put those in the comments too. And I'm not too sure what we can do, but we can try and fix it.
Right, and I know we've had a lot of sort of in our private groups like discussion about this topic. So we hope to get to all the questions. If we don't, please just put your question in and we will get back to you, whether that's just offline or at a separate time if we don't have time today. So I'm just going to introduce, bear with me while I read this because I don't want to make any mistakes. So Mary Jo is a registered psychotherapist, specializing in attachment, trauma, and parenting. She facilitates secondary attachment and the resolution of developmental trauma through family and parent psychotherapy. She's also an author. Her book is titled Caring Together, a guide for parents, foster parents, and adoptive parents of children who are in care. In addition, she's a past president and current advisory board member for the Association for Training in Trauma and Attachment in Children, and an active board member and advisor with Adopt for Life for many years. So she and her husband live in Southern Ontario, where she manages their forest. They have 5 children. They are adoptive parents and were long-term therapeutic foster parents for 20 years, and now also have 5 grandchildren. So Mary Jo, thank you. I know I probably didn't do you justice. There probably could be like 2 pages written for your bio, but we want to get to everyone's questions. So thank you for being here. I'm just going to pass it back to Catherine.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback on my end, so I don't know if everybody else is. I apologize for that. I'm sorry. Speaking, my cats are trying to come in, so they might be joining us today as well. So thank you guys so much. Mary Jo, this is a question. This topic is something that comes up so often with our adoptive kin and customary care families, and I feel like there's just a lot of general misconceptions about what the honeymoon period is. So we're just really hoping that this could be something that perhaps awaiting and getting ready families can understand, but also for us who are in the thick of it to really understand what actually is this. So that's actually our first question. So can we start by really explaining what this kind of honeymoon period is? I don't even know if that's the term that we use. Is this a real thing? Is this, like, what does this term mean?
So let's just say, for instance, that you are going to be a house guest. Let's say you're doing a course in some other province or country, and it's not COVID time, and you are billeted at someone's home for a couple of weeks. So when you go there to someone's home, you're a stranger, you're a guest, and I'm talking about the normal honeymoon period for people and adults. And so what that's all about is that we have a social self And that's the persona that we use to interact with other people that are not our people that we're really close to. So we kind of turn on our social self, and the social self is the self that we use when we go to work, that when we're out in the community, when we're speaking to the cashier at the store, or the waiter, server at the restaurant. We speak politely, generally speaking, and we have this social persona. And then when we go home, or not when we're not at this guest house, when we go home, we kind of shed that skin and put on our pajamas, and we're our true self. But when we're a guest in someone else's house, we keep the social persona on even when we're in our living environment. And so that is the normal expression of sort of the honeymoon period. And if you happen to be billeted for this in this home for 6 months instead of 2 weeks, then eventually you're going to start leaving your socks in the living room and the dirty dishes in the sink, right? So you're going to kind of get to that end of being really, consciously aware of your P's and Q's all the time. That's kind of the normal expression of the honeymoon period. However, with our children, it's entirely different. And it's entirely different because it's not about being polite and minding our P's and Q's. It's all about safety. So unfortunately, many of our children have moved many, many times, far too many times. And so what happens is that because they have experienced, and because they're children in care or children from an orphanage type setting, they've experienced adults who are not safe, who are not trustworthy, and who did not stay around, right? They left, or the child was removed. Either way, the relationship was ruptured. So when we see a child move into a new place, they have to have this extreme version of the social self, which is all about, I better be really, really good, because I don't know what will happen if I'm not. So there's that aspect of it, but there's also the other aspect of, if I'm not really, really good, I'll get moved again. And so there are those two aspects that are really pushing this child to work extremely hard to be perfect. Sometimes you see really, really perfectionistic behavior. Like at the real extreme, you see children being very charming. Can I get you a cup of tea? Or they're being really coy. I'm so cute. Oh, don't you just love me? And they also engage in what I call sucking up behavior. And I don't mean that to be rude. I actually mean that in kind of the biological way of what baby mammals do when they're around an adult of their same species. They have some kind of behavior that is called appeasing behavior, or sucking up behavior. It makes sense because often it's about looking like you're sucking. So baby horses, for instance, will sort of arch their back and put their head up and go into the nursing position and go with their mouth to tell a strange adult, I'm just a baby, I'm not going to hurt you. So appeasing behavior or sucking up behavior is about, I don't feel safe, and I'm going to tell you that I'm a baby and I'm okay and I'm not going to hurt you. So that's why we also see a lot of regression. So kids will kind of look baby-like, or puppy-like, they're rolling their back on the floor. You know how dogs do that? That's an appeasing behavior. They roll on the back on their floor, expose their neck. Oh, I'm so unthreatening, right? So you'll see regression. You'll see sucking up or appeasing behavior. You'll see coy, charming, cute. No child should ever be charming. Leave charming to used car salespeople. No child ever need to be charming. And when a child is being charming, it's telling you not that they're being manipulative. I really don't like to see in the literature that children who are scared are being manipulative. So one of the, I did some research because honestly, it's not written about very much, this honeymoon period. And I did some research and I found some things that I really didn't like to read about children You know, there's some websites that use, you know, terms like rad kids, and I don't ever like to use that term. We don't define children by their experiences. So they, you know, some of those websites talk more that it's more behavioral and very cognitive. So they talk about how it's the child is sort of consciously trying to gain control over the adult. They're consciously trying to figure out the adult and be really charming so that they can figure out the adult's triggers so that they can gain control over the adult. Now that sounds really pretty, you know, antisocial to me. And I think you might see that in a child who's been moved 15 or 20 times, who's quite a bit older. And people talk about it as being a testing behavior. Honestly, in all the years that I've been a psychotherapist, which is now, you know, a lot of years, you know, 25, I've only ever had one child tell me that he tests his parents, his foster parents. This is not a conscious, cognitive, manipulative behavior. It's a much more of a midbrain, mammalian-based response of the autonomic nervous system to say, I'm not safe, and I better do whatever I can to figure out whether or not I'm safe. And that is keep these adults from either kicking me out the door or punishing me in a way that I don't know what's going to happen. So that, yes, it's a real thing.
So I have some questions for that aren't even a part of our list. And knowing you, I'm just going to ask them. So hearing this and hearing that, the response of it, is this something that would happen when a child is first placed, or is it something that can happen later on? Is there a typical time frame to this?
So when they talk about the honeymoon period, they are talking about when a child moves in. Right. So that's this referral. But you see appeasing, coy, charming, sucking up behavior whenever a child doesn't feel safe, because it's one of the three options. And we don't talk about it enough. We talk about fight, flight, freeze as really high arousal. We talk about shutdown as really low arousal. But the coy, appeasing behavior is still in the middle. So the child doesn't look highly dysregulated, but the child is safety seeking. The child, when you see it, it tells you that the child is not feeling safe at this moment. So even as even typically developing children with their birth parents, you know, they do something wrong and they go, oh, mommy, I'm so sorry, right? You see that. That's normal. That's a little bit of appeasing to make sure that you get back in the good books of your attachment figure. And so appeasement is a normal thing to do with your attachment figure because it's the middle range. So it's kind of a healthier thing. We see this in the honeymoon period because neither high arousal, fight, flight, freeze, or low arousal, shutdown is safe if you don't know who these adults are. So you have to do the appeasing part. But it's hard work and it can only last a very short time. The more traumatized the child, likely the shorter the amount of time.
That makes sense to me. And I'm jumping questions again, but is there is there an age? So we hear so often infants, you adopt a child as an infancy, they don't experience the same trauma, which what we know now is that's a myth. That is not correct. That infants absolutely can experience trauma. They will experience trauma if they're removed from their family of origin. Do you find that this is more like older children, or is it?
I'm going to say from 1 year up, you could see any of those, any three, you know, high, low, or in the middle, the appeasement. And the appeasement is actually going towards shutdown. So one of the things that we see is that when kids are really appeasing, they could go too low from there. Now babies, I don't think that babies' nervous system is well enough developed to have that complexity yet. So I don't think you see appeasement in infants. They're much more reactive. You're going to see the high or the low, or I'm calm and quiet. And that's not going to be kind of a more conscious, more social. You have to have the social development skills. They're the social engagement skills that comes after a year to 18 months.
That makes sense. Thank you. Okay, back to the actual questions that we have. We've kind of answered this. Will every family experience this? And is this something that is specific to adoption? Or, I mean, you talked about families of origins and like bio families and bio children, how they kind of have that sucking up behavior after their, but like, is this something even like kinship families or like any families really can experience? Should families kind of be prepared as they're in the awaiting process that this is probably going to happen for them?
Well, you know, it often happens whenever a child moves into a new family, right? Because there was one website that I found that said, you know, it's really the wrong term, honeymoon period, because it's a honeymoon for the parents, but it's actually hell for the children, right? Because they are in such hell that they have to be so careful about their behavior and work so hard to keep themselves regulated so that they don't turn these new parents against them or make them dangerous. So it's really hell for the kids and honeymoon for the parents. And so I really agreed with that one website that I did find that was saying, hey, we've labeled this really wrong. If you look at it from the kids' point of view, they're having to work tremendously hard to keep themselves regulated and be on their best behavior. And of course, that's going to just collapse at some time, and you probably end the honeymoon period with some kind of blowout. But back to your question, I think it happens anytime a child moves, no matter how or they're moving. And the other part is that it probably happens more so when we do the transition of moving from one home to another, when we do that transition poorly. So if we do the transition in a better way, then likely the children have more time to go back and forth and kind of bring together their day-to-day way of being with their way of being in the new house, and not have such a separated, oh, I'm just me, and oh, now I got to be the perfect me, that they can go back and forth and kind of integrate them better. So when we do transitions better, I think it probably reduces the honeymoon effect, or the hell effect.
I like that, the honeymoon / hell effect, depending on how you're experiencing it. I think you're actually sort of answered the next question that we have, but this question that I'm going to ask is something that we hear often in our close community groups. Is I'm having a hard time trying to understand how significant behaviors and difficulties, you know, we hear often that like people said like the honeymoon period has ended, the room is trashed, or I'm starting to see a lot of attitude or pushback or aggression and violence in the home, or, you know, this kind of sweet child is now lost. You know, we kind of hear those things. So this one family said that they're having a hard time understanding how having these significant behaviors and experiencing difficulties as a family is actually an indication that their child is now feeling safe. So can you really explain that? I think you kind of know already, but
yeah, I don't know that it's about feeling safe. I think it's a lot more about I can't maintain this any longer. I don't think it's about feeling safe. I think it's about the effort that's required to maintain that good kid persona is so huge. I mean, I remember my own son who has a diagnosis of ADHD. Chose not to be medicated because it changed his personality, and he just preferred to be kind of the outgoing person rather than kind of the other person that his medication made him. And so he had to work really, 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 really hard to stay on task at school, and it was really effortful. And even as young as 8 years old, he would come in and say, listen, I just got to go to my room for a little bit. And he would just need an hour just to lie down or just do his Lego or just be quiet and not have to put in the effort of being what he needed to be. And so I really appreciated how much effort it took. And so for a child who's got this huge history, for our children who've got histories of developmental trauma, and typically dysregulation is a big part of what we see, the effort involved is so huge that, to me, the end of it is really when it's just too hard to maintain the effort anymore. And so I don't think it means that they're feeling safe. I think it means that they can't keep it up any longer. Yeah. And I think we need to be telling them that they are safe right from the beginning, and we need to prove it, that they can be whoever they are, and we'll accept them for who they are. You know, kind of the good, bad, and the ugly.
Exactly. Yeah. I know that for some families who may see some really big behaviors, or see that, you know, we talked about that kind of blowout, then all of a sudden it's like, where did this child come from? You know, I wasn't expecting this type of behaviors. It can be scary for people who are new to the process or waiting for the right match. And so, again, not one of the jumping questions, but like for someone who might be hearing this for the first time and may be scared or may be wondering, you know, what do we do about it? I'm wondering if you can share in your experiences, at least, what it is that families can do to help. So we talked about the prep work ahead of time. We talked about the feeling safe. We talked about the transitioning and how we need to have that, the best to everyone's ability to have that done in the right sequence and well. And I mean, sometimes matches and placements happen so fast. Is there anything that adoptive kin and customer care families can do or reach out for? Obviously, attachment therapy is a huge part of it, but is there anything else as well?
Well, I just want to point out, before I answer that question though, I just want to point out that grief is a huge part. So the safety is the first part, but then the second part is, and I'm not leaving. This isn't a 2-week vacation. I've been here 6 weeks. I'm not going back to the people that I was with, and that might have been a really wonderful foster home. Or this means I'm adopted. I'm never going home. So at some point, for all children older than a year, that hits them.
Mm.
And then there's another piece that hits them, especially for children who are just coming from, you know, a rather, you know, traumatic family environment and into foster care. That grief is not only for their family, but it's also for, why didn't my family give me what this family is giving me? And so there's this realization, whether it's in the body or the soul or the heart, or for older children cognitively, here I am getting all my needs met, people are kind, people are smiling, we're doing fun things, I'm not scared. Why didn't I have that from my own mom and dad? And so there's the grief that hits there too. And all of these things hit in those first few months. And I think that that one of the reasons why kids come out of this honeymoon behavior is that they're starting to recognize that this is a place where they could be staying and they're not going back. Grief is starting to hit. So if you recognize it as grief also, that for me, that's also about making sure that we have openness, making sure that we have, you know, post-placement visits with whomever the child was with, if that's safe. And if it's not safe, then it's under supervised conditions, but kids can't just lose people in their lives.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about also post-placement visits and maintaining connections, or minimizing losses. And so for me, that's a lot of what is really, really important for these children, that adults are continuously expressing, you know, I'm okay with all of you. The happy part and the sad part and the mad part and the scared parts. And I'm okay with all parts of you, and you'll be accepted here for just who you are. And you're going through a really hard time, and we'll be here with you to go through it with you. I think that that's really the best that people can do, is just openly express their acceptance of their child and all parts of their child, the before part, the after part, you know, and that they don't have to be perfect, and that we can be sad together about the people that you're missing. I'll be here for you to be sad about them. And of course, you're going to be sad about missing them. Yeah.
I think what really resonated with me just hearing you, I could hear you speak all day actually, but you just stay here all day and listen to and I think that, like, hearing what you're saying and trying to put myself back to where I was as a recently placed family, it's very, I'll speak on a first person. It was very easy for me to say, well, this is my happily ever after. I have gone through 5 miscarriages. I went through paperwork. People were I had to share everything about my life to be approved. And, you know, we were matched and finally got the match after waiting. And then this children, in our case, were placed in our home. And I had these expectations of this happily ever after. And I read the books, you know, I'm a social worker, so I know. And then it wasn't. And I think this kind of goes off into like a post-adoption depression, but I feel like for adoptive, awaiting, newly matched families, it's so important to reframe that to the child experience, because it was almost like I was taking it personally, of saying, like, haven't I gone through enough, and now I have this? And that just kind of goes back to the, like, this adoptive parent rose-colored lens that we have, is that, you know, once the match happens, we'll, you know, run off into the sunset to Disneyland, and that's not a reality. And I think that as adoptive parents, we really need to challenge ourselves on this notion and to really realize our role and our privilege and the magnitude of our decisions and what that has on the children. So it really is kind of what hit home for me from hearing that from you, and hopefully some awaiting parents who are listening today can also kind of take back that, because I remember I was angry. I was angry that the honeymoon period was over and that I was seeing these behaviors. I was frustrated that I wasn't prepared enough. I was the why me martyr syndrome. And I think that identifying that in yourself is therapeutic for my own, realizing that I hadn't dealt with what I should have. But I think as awaiting parents and newly adoptive parents, we really need to challenge ourselves on that and know that if we're in this, I've heard the word fawning before. I don't know if that's an appropriate term, but where the sucking up behavior happens, and then when it stops, you know, that isn't an indication of who you are as a person. And it's very easy to put ourselves in that position. So I just wanted to share that because it really hit home for me. And I think that if the Snack and Chat was available 8 years ago, I think I would have, it would have changed my perspective. So I hope other people can hear that. But yeah, and just knowing that it's okay to reach out and say that it's hard, and it's okay to say that you're struggling with this and that your own emotions or your own trauma is coming up, because I think that, you know, we're all real and we're not perfect, and we're all kind of in this together. And if you do make a mistake, if you react and respond in a way to the behavior that is counteractive, that isn't allowing the child to feel safe, it's okay to kind of do that, but say you're sorry and acknowledge that you've made mistakes and kind of move forward, I think has been my experience. I can't talk about anybody else's, but that's been my experience at least. So I just wanted to share that. In that, yeah.
And I think
that
about I think about how when kids are moved and they're this sort of this transition from some place where they've been for a while. So, you know, a typical situation is that children have been in a foster home for a while, and they have become, you know, formerly Crown wards, but now extended care. And then when they move to the adoptive home, that's the final slam of the door about ever going home, right? So no matter what the judges have said, or the paperwork, or the social workers, or anybody else, that going to bed in that adoptive home is the final closure on that hope that most children have that I'll be able to be with my real mom and dad, right? Or my first parents. And so when that very same night, as you know, a child might be going to bed crying silently or alone in the dark, that they're never going home, the adoptive parents are downstairs, you know, drinking champagne because we got kids.
Yep.
And that disconnect can be really, really harmful.
Absolutely.
So, and that's not the same for all children. All children, like I know adoptive children who say, I've been waiting to be adopted. I've been waiting to be adopted. I can't wait to have an adoptive family. And that means somebody's done some good work. So foster parents who are saying, I'm here until you have a forever family. I'm going to help you with your forever family. And workers are saying, yep, if you're not going home, you're going to have a forever family. And, you know, saying goodbye to the parents and doing a good job with that and going through the grief. And kids are going, I'm ready for an adoptive family. I can't wait. And then finally meeting an adoptive family. If we do that right, then I think the transition is much easier for the child. There's less grief, less trauma. And then in fact, there's probably a very small honeymoon effect, very small hell effect, because the child's ready, willing, and able to make a new start. And so often we move children when they're not.
Yes. Even I've seen, even if they're over 8 and have agreed to it, that doesn't mean that it's okay.
Oh yeah, so what are my choices? This or, okay, might as well do that.
Yeah, exactly.
If I stay in this foster home, I could be moved every couple of years, so if I go there, I won't be moved anymore. Okay, I'll go there. Right? So, you know, and I know that story, but I also do know stories of kids saying, I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think that's because of good preparation.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, the transition and having workers or practitioners who are well versed in this and who and I'm sure it looks different for every child, so not having that cookie cutter approach of saying, well, I gave them a life book, we were talking about that earlier, I gave them a life book, so we're good to go. Like, it doesn't work like that for every child.
I'm working on a new series of books right now, called right now I think it's called What's Happening Now, and it's going to, I think it's going to be 9 little booklets, and it's for every stage of moving through the system. So every stage from moving into foster care and go, you know, access visits, going home, going into kin care, or transitioning through into adoptive permanency families, and then visiting with your first mom and dad, your parents or family. So all of those steps would have a little booklet to help kids know where they are in their journey. Because I think often, you know, children don't understand what's happening. So I'm going to make 2 sets, one for kids over 6 and one for kids under 6, so that kids, because I think we really, really have to do a better job of helping children understand the process. You know, you weren't taken away from your first parents so that these parents could have you.
Exactly. And you don't have to fulfill some sort of role in that family now. You're not here to fix something. Which I think a lot of children can feel as well. I appreciate that we've gone a little divergent, but I'm not surprised given everything that we've talked about. So I just want to make sure, because we only have 10 minutes left, make sure that we are answering.
When we're looking at support and resources, I mean, I think it's really important to talk about how the child is prepared, how the grief work is done, how the transitioning work is done, how the placement, the actual placement visits and so on is being done, and how then once a child is placed, how there's this maintaining of connections and the reducing of losses for children, so that they're still able to visit foster parents, they're still able to visit their family of origin, and that the adoptive parents are really well supported. And how do I do this? This is a skill I didn't have before. You know, I'm learning how to be a parent maybe for the first time, or learning how to parent this child, but I'm also learning how to navigate managing contact in openness with their family of origin. And these are a lot of skills and that's why I wrote the book Caring Together, so that people can learn the skills that they need in order to manage all of the the relationships that the kids will need to maintain. And so I think those are the most important parts. And of course, I think if you can find an adoption competent, attachment competent, trauma competent therapist, that's also very helpful.
I agree. And I know that right now with COVID, things are probably looking different, but a lot of adoption trauma competent therapists and psychotherapists are doing virtual as well. So I know some people are saying, well, how do I access them right now? I know technology has come in very handy for the last few months as well.
My whole program is online now.
Is it? See, everyone, and I think it just makes it a bit more accessible as well. And then hopefully relationships are built, and then once we're done this, we can transition in. Okay, so I have one last question for you. So a family is saying, we're seeing significant behaviors and our relationship is struggling. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? We're headed towards an adoption breakdown. And so I'm assuming this family then the honeymoon period is over, and now they're seeing significant behaviors in their home, and they're feeling like they can't manage, and they're worried about a breakdown. And we have seen that happen. I mean, all of us have seen that happen after this. Like, do you have any suggestions or any kind of light?
So there are three parts of an equation about placement stability. The first part is parent capacity. So when parents become exhausted and frightened, because if you're facing an adoption breakdown, you're frightened. This is very scary. It's shaming. You feel quite a lot of shame, and shame is very painful, and grief, regret, all kinds of things. So when parents are facing this, their ability in the moment to be attuned, giving, compassionate, empathic parents, when they're feeling all of these other things inside, and the worry, the fear, then their parent capacity is going to start to drop. Another part of the equation is supports. So parents have to have enough supports to make things work. In COVID times, that's really hard, right? And the other part of the equation is the kids' needs. So there could be one kid, two kids, three kids in a sibling set. There could be children that are born to these parents, natal children in the family. So all of the children have needs. So that whole equation reads the sum of the parent's capacity, because there might be two parents. So the parent A and parent B, their capacities together, plus their supports, that has to be greater than the needs of all of the children. So when parent capacity goes down, children's needs are going up. And as the honeymoon period ends, the children are falling apart and their needs are going up. The only thing that we can change kind of immediately is supports.
Right.
And so Adopt for Life is a support, right? And your extended family is a support if you can have them in the house right now, which you can't, right? So one family that I know is struggling, and so I've asked them to identify one other couple that can come in and be part of their family. And if anybody questions, we just say they're daycare providers, right? So daycare is still allowed. So to have at least one other person or family within your bubble during COVID times that can come in and give you, if not, allowing you to leave the house, even just to go out for a walk in the woods for a couple of hours, to give you some support in the house. So the idea is if you're feeling like you're sinking, quickly try to increase your support. And Adopt for Life is, one of the best ways to do that right off the bat, quickly, immediately today. You'll probably get some support. And then to work out how you can get at least one other adult into your house during COVID times to give you some respite and get yourself time away and do your own looking after you and rebuilding you to rebuild your parent capacity, because you can't change child's needs quickly. They have to go down slowly, right? So supports to boost, to allow parents to increase their capacity.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of families too are just so scared in the beginning to say that they can't, they don't have the capacity, like how you termed it. So I think that for anybody watching right now or on replay, knowing that, saying that you're struggling at the beginning, saying that you know you're in the depths of it all, isn't a reflection of who you are as a parent, and that it is okay to reach out. It is okay to call your CAS or your practitioner saying you don't know what to do, you need that support. Because I feel like we have, as adoptive families, a lot of us try and feel like we have to kind of show that we're okay and that we're managing and coping, and that's not reality for a lot of families. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means, like you said, the equation is not equal right now.
So parents, it's really helpful if parents understand that they are their children's most important resource. You know, we all have cars, and, you know, we all take our cars in for maintenance because we need our cars. Well, if you only ever were going to have one car for the rest of your life, you would be really, really keen to keep it maintained, right? So that's a car. You, the parent, you're your child's number one resource for the rest of their life, right? You're their number one resource. And so you have to maintain it.
Yeah.
And that means self-care. And everybody hates that term self-care. Well, at least I do, I hate it. But if we say, I need to look after my child's most important, most valuable resource, and that's me, then I need to look after me for my child, for the sake of my child. And that means get out, get into nature, get some exercise, make sure you're sleeping, make sure you're eating. Those three: eat, sleep, exercise.
Basic needs, right? Essence.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have a little visitor. Absolutely. So thank you so much. That's toast, everybody. My 5-year-old need. So thank you so much. I think that we can talk about this topic for another hour, but I am mindful that we only have a couple minutes left, and that you have to get on with your day as well, Mary Jo. So I wanted to thank you very, very much for coming. I know that I think we touched on most of the questions at least. And so if anyone is watching now on replay and you have a question, feel free to still comment or private message us, because we still want to be able to help support you. Mary Jo, you did a Snack and Chat with us, I feel like it's months ago, about your Caring Together book that you wrote. So we're going to actually link that into the comments of today's Snack and Chat for those of you who are interested, because I have a copy of the book. I found it very helpful, and I think everybody, including families of origins, foster parents, workers, we should all be reading this book because there's so many helpful tips. So we'll make a little plug there. We appreciate your time and your insights. Next week, we are talking to Charlene April. She's the Executive Director of Creating Roots Canada. And Creating Roots is an organization, a grassroots organization that supports children who are aging out of foster care. So Charlene is going to share a little bit about her personal journey and share about how her organization is supporting children who are leaving care. So thank you so much. I'm so glad our tech worked for us, at least for the 45 minutes. Chantal, am I missing anything?
No, I think that's perfect.
I feel rusty too. Take a 2-week break and all of a sudden you don't remember what we're doing. So we appreciate it. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week. Have a good week, guys. Take care.
Thanks again, Mary Jo.
Bye-bye.
Bye.